As soon as I got out of the car, I was surprised when the maid from next door ran over, her hands shaking as she handed me a memory card and said, "Don't agree to anything. They're scary." I didn't understand what was happening until I inserted the memory card into my computer and saw my daughter-in-law, Sienna, whispering her plan to take over the house that was still in my name. That scheme made me shiver, and it also signaled she was about to use my own son as a lever to break me. But she didn't know that justice is always right and will always side with the righteous. And I had a plan for this. Before we get into the details, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I got out of the taxi at the end of the street, the Scottsdale sun bouncing off the red brick and rising from the pavement like the lid had just been pulled off a kiln. I stood at my son's front door with my finger on the bell, but hadn't pressed it yet. The gate next door cracked open. A thin woman with her hair pulled back in a dark t-shirt hurried over, eyes flicking around like someone might be watching. It was Rosa, the housekeeper for my son's neighbor. I'd met her a few times before. "Mr. Frank," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Take this. Be careful. And please don't agree to anything." She placed a memory card, no bigger than my thumbnail, into my palm and closed my fingers over it. She shot a glance at my son's house, turned on her heel, and I heard the lock click behind her. The street slipped back into quiet. Only the porch fan clicked above me and a sparrow landed on the fence, then darted away. I clenched the card. Such a tiny thing, yet it weighed in my hand like an iron bolt. I'd imagined this trip would be a handful of easy days with my son's family. Pots clattering, something good on the stove, maybe a glass of milk for a grandchild. I hadn't done any of that yet. Instead, I was holding a fuse. I rang the bell. No answer. I used the key Aaron had given me long ago, stepped inside and called out. My voice ran across empty rooms and came back thin and hollow. The place was spotless in that overdone way. Lemon cleaner and fresh spray lingering in the air. I set my suitcase in a corner and drew the curtain back. The neighbor's house was shut tight. The thin woman was gone. After dinner that night, I went to the guest room, turned on a single lamp, and pulled the curtains closed. The little rectangle had left a mark in my palm. I opened the laptop and slid in the memory card. One folder. Inside, a single video with a meaningless name. I hesitated a beat and clicked. The camera angle was low. Half the frame was ground sometimes. Other times, the lens tilted up and caught a string of patio lights. Wind muddied the sound, but I recognized my son's backyard at once. The long wooden table, the big umbrella, and the old thermometer on the brick wall. Sienna, my daughter-in-law, sat across from a man with dyed hair and a crisp white shirt. Two other figures hovered at the edge of the shot. The patio lights sprinkled gold freckles across Sienna's face, and her eyes looked cold in the glow. "The deed is still in his name," Sienna said, voice clipped and low. "No transfer, no money. Tomorrow night, same place. Be on time. We talk in person, no calls." The man raised his brows. "If the old man won't budge, we'll need another way." Sienna paused like she was pressing a seal into hot wax. "We'll talk tomorrow night. Go." The video ended. No blueprint, no step-by-step instructions, just a time and an intention. I sat still for a long time, listening to the air conditioner whisper. I'd spent years in a steel shop. You learn the difference between a hammer striking a nail and a hammer hitting wood just to scare you. The sound in that video wasn't a scare. I copied the file to my laptop, slid the card into my shirt pocket, and shut the computer. The lamp laid a thin gold bar across the tabletop. I pressed my palm to my pocket. The tiny thing stayed cold. The next morning, I knocked on the neighbor's door. Rosa opened right away. Dark circles, hair tied in a hurry. "Morning, Frank," she said softly, steady despite the whisper. "I figured you watched it. I only clean out back. Found it by chance." "Thank you, Rosa," I said. "They've got something set for tonight. I'm not exactly nimble sneaking around in the dark, so I need your help." If you see unfamiliar cars, text me. If it's safe, record a bit, audio or video. But don't put yourself in danger. Nothing is worth that. She hugged a well-worn plastic cup to her chest and nodded. I'll try. At noon, I drove to the Maricopa County Recorder's office. Cool air, the smell of paper and disinfectant, a waiting room with numbers on a screen. When mine flashed, I stepped to the counter, showed my ID, and explained. The house was still in my name. I wanted to review the file, and I wanted a written note added stating that no action on the property would be valid unless I appeared in person with identification. The clerk listened carefully, typing in bursts, pausing to confirm the wording. She printed a page, stamped it, and read my request back to me in a clear voice. No activity at this time, she added. If anyone files paperwork, we'll refer to this note. I walked to the door, stopped, and pulled out my phone. I texted my son, meet me at the coffee shop on the corner. The place was nearly empty, warmed by the smell of roasted beans and something fresh from the oven. Aaron arrived 5 minutes late, shirt wrinkled, eyes tired. I slid my phone across the table and played the video. He watched once, then again, then pressed a hand to his forehead. I know she's ambitious, he said, barely above a whisper. I thought it was about business, not the house. She said the house had to flow into this deal so her contacts would fund it. I pushed back, and she told me I lacked vision. You know the deed is still in my name? I asked. I know. He swallowed. I told her there was no need to transfer it because I wanted you to keep it. That felt safer. I didn't think she'd find another way. I looked my son in the eye. I saw fatigue, shame, and the same look I'd seen when he was a boy, after he'd kicked his basketball into the drainage ditch and stood there, waiting for me to climb down and get it. Stand with me, I said. Right now. A house is wood and brick, but a family isn't. No home is worth selling your trust. He nodded slowly like he was peeling off a tight film. I'll stand with you. He drew a deep breath. What do you need me to do? We'll keep quiet in the right places, speak at the right time, and do the right things, I said. Go home like normal. Gather whatever you can about Sienna's business dealings. Take photos. Tomorrow night they'll talk again. Don't provoke them. Let them keep going. We need more time and proof. Should we tell the police now? He asked. I don't know yet, I said, and felt the weight of the answer. Night fell. A text from Rosa lit up my screen. People out back. I'm recording. My heart kicked. 5 minutes later, she sent an audio clip. I pressed my headphones tight. Wind first, leaves whispering, then Sienna's voice. Low, sharp. If he won't sign, say he's not competent. I have a template for the medical form. We wrap this by the weekend. A man's voice, rough and impatient. Move fast. Money has to land on time. I didn't text Rosa back. Didn't want a ping to give her away. I forwarded the audio to Aaron. Start in the morning, I wrote. At sunrise, we met Rosa behind the neighbor's house. She handed over photos of license plates and penciled notes of times. I stood behind that tree, she said, pointing. No one noticed. That's enough, I told her, squeezing her hand. From here, it's on us and the police. I called an old friend, a neurologist. He opened a lunchtime slot. I sat across from him and took the assessments. 5 words to memorize and repeat, numbers forward and backward, the clock face with hands set to a specific time. I went slow. I wasn't trying to be clever. I just wanted to prove the simplest thing. I was still myself. The results printed in 15 minutes. Cognition normal, no signs of decline. He looked at me over his glasses. Your stamina's still there, he said. I smiled and thanked him. The page slid into a folder. The folder went into a zipper pouch. The pouch went into my suitcase. The key to the pouch went on the ring with the front door key. Order settles a man. While I was gone, Aaron was at home. He opened drawers and flipped through file folders. Company names he'd never heard of. Some sounded brand new. Others looked like shells. He photographed each page and noted the time, then put everything back exactly as it had been. In a corner, he found a pencil note. Meet VH, 10 p.m., backyard. He took a picture of that too, closed the drawer, washed his hands, poured water, and sat at the kitchen table pretending to scroll. When Sienna came in, tossing her purse onto a chair, she asked, "What do you want for dinner?" And he answered, "Whatever," as if the lake of his life were glass still. That afternoon, we went to the Scottsdale Police Department. White walls, even air conditioning, posters along the hallway asking citizens to report crimes. The detective sat across from us with no rush in his eyes. I told the story from the beginning. The memory card, the video, Rosa's recording, the medical evaluation, the photos of shady paperwork, the pencil note in the drawer. He didn't interrupt, only hooked questions together so the line wouldn't break. Who was there? When? Why are you certain they'll force a signing Sunday night? I'm not guessing, I said. I heard them set the time. He scribbled a short report, handed me a receipt for the evidence, and said, "Live as if nothing's changed. When they show up, we'll enter on your signal. Don't change your routine. Don't spook them into rescheduling. Sunday night, when they move, stay calm. Keep your phone unlocked and call. We don't need you to say anything. Once we have the signal, we come in." I nodded. He turned to Aaron. "Stand by your father. Don't step in unless you have to. When it's time, move between them. Enough to block, not enough to start a fight. We don't want anyone hurt." We sat in the car a while, letting our breaths catch up. Aaron stared out the windshield, worried and sharp at the same time. I told him to breathe, that we were going to be all right. Then we drove home. The night before the meeting felt like a stage set. Sienna sliced meat, poured wine, and asked Aaron about work, as if nothing were dangling over the table between us. "I believe assets belong with whoever can manage them," she said lightly, like it was just a thought that came to her. "I believe assets belong where memory lives," Aaron said without looking up. "What keeps our memories tends to keep our home." She tilted her head and smiled thinly. "Memories fade. People age. Sometimes they're not clear-headed enough to make the best decisions for the family." I laid my knife down and wiped my hands. "Old folks can be slow," I said evenly. "Some things are stronger for being slow." She held my gaze a beat longer, the light throwing a tiny blade across her eyes, then lifted her glass. "To certainty," she said. We washed dishes and put everything away the way we always did. The only difference was how loudly I heard each spoon tap the bowl, like the tick of a clock. Sunday night, a firm knock, 8 o'clock. Aaron looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. He opened the door. Sienna came in first, followed by the man from the video. Victor, cologne first, hair too dark for his face, and two stone-faced men in black. The living room was bright enough to see the veins in their necks. "Let's get this done," Sienna said, dropping a stack of papers on the table. "Sign the transfer of this house. Your family stays. No one gets hurt." Victor stood behind my chair. "Sign it, old man. Don't make trouble. You've earned your rest." One of the other men curled his lip, ready for the nod. "I want to read it," I said, nudging the stack half an inch away. "All of it." "You don't need to read it," Sienna replied, still sugar soft. "Everything's prepared. Just sign." "Why would I sign something I don't understand?" I asked. A gloved hand landed on my shoulder. The chair squealed against the floor. Aaron leaned forward. "Don't touch my father." Victor slid a thin sheet onto the pile. "Medical form. You sign here acknowledging your condition. Pure formality. Then everything goes smoothly." I looked at the blank line where my name would go. "You don't know I was evaluated this morning," I said. Sienna froze for a heartbeat, then smirked. "Paper is paper. What matters is that the family agrees." "The family is right here," I said, pointing at Aaron. "And we don't." The hand on my shoulder tightened. I heard my own breath. Years working beside a furnace taught me one thing. The hotter the fire, the steadier your hands must be. "All right," I said quietly. "If you want me to sign, let me get my glasses." I dipped my head and touched my shirt pocket with my left hand. The back door burst open. Footsteps. A hard voice. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" White bars of flashlight cut through the room. The two men in black let go and stepped back. Victor spun around, swallowing a curse. Sienna stood motionless for a long beat, then turned with a deadbolt stare. The detective came in, set a body cam on the table, and spoke clearly. "We have an emergency search order and a detainment order. Everyone stay calm." He flicked his eyes toward me and Aaron, quick, like a foreman counting nails before sealing a crate. "Mr. Frank," he said under his breath, "stay seated." Aaron shifted, placing his body between me and Victor. His shoulders squared. His head didn't bow. Officers moved in from the hall and the back door, cuffing the two muscle men first. Victor raised his hand slowly, jaw clamped tight. Sienna's mouth curled. "You people are very good at creating theater." The detective tapped his phone, and audio filled the room. Sienna's voice from 2 nights before, as clear as if she'd been in the corner. "If he won't sign, say he's not competent. I have a template for the medical form. We wrap this by the weekend." He stopped the clip and set the phone down. "Would you like to hear the part about the money moving on time?" Silence thickened. The air conditioner pushed a ribbon of cold air through the vent. Another officer's pen scratched quietly at a notebook. Sienna looked at me without a smile. "You think you won because you got lucky." "I think I didn't lose," I said, "because we still have the law, and because I have my son." Victor turned his head and stared at nothing on the floor. The two hired men leaned against the wall, hands pinned behind them. Sienna inhaled, exhaled, and said, "Lawyer," the way some people repeat a prayer when they've run out of words. We left the station at first light. I signed my statement, handed over the cognitive evaluation, the memory card, and the photos. Rosa arrived later, clutching her bag to her chest like a charm. She passed a bundle of penciled notes, neat and small, with times and details. "I just did the right thing," she said in a shaking but steady English. The detective thanked her and promised to protect her identity in the file. I thanked her again. She smiled the faint, relieved smile of someone who's just set a watered plant in the sun. In the morning, I went back to the recorder's office. The same clerk greeted me with a look of recognition, checked the file, and printed a confirmation that the note, "No transfer valid unless Frank Miller appears in person and signs in front of staff," was still in force. She slid a business card across the counter. "Call me if anyone shows up asking about the property," she said. The page was thin, but it felt like the solid click of a lock in my hand. At home, the kitchen smelled like strong coffee. Aaron poured me a cup. Blue ink stained his fingers from signing so many forms the night before. He sat studying his palms. "I let it get too far," he said, almost to himself. "No," I said, passing him his cup. "We pulled it back to where it belongs." He took a sip, winced at the heat, and let out a small, honest laugh. I could almost hear a slack line pulled taut again, not snapping, just holding right. We spent the late morning throwing open windows, pulling down old sticky notes from the fridge, corralling loose papers into a box. Sun spilled across the tile. Somewhere a mower droned. Kids called to each other down the block. The neighbor's dog barked when the mail truck rattled past. Ordinary enough to be something you said grace over. In the afternoon, we drove to a cemetery on the edge of Phoenix. The grass was green, the breeze light. My wife's headstone sat in the shade of an old oak. Dry leaves spun down in slow circles. I palmed the cool stone. Beverly, I thought, we didn't let the house become a collar around the living. Aaron stood with his hands folded. "Mom," he whispered, "we stopped something ugly in time." I didn't ask for anything else. I just breathed and listened to the wind shiver through the blades of grass until the weight on my back loosened. That night we sat on the porch without many words. It was a hot month, but the desert air softens after dark. Somewhere a neighbor played music low. The melody drifted like water. I thought about the house. Brick, wood, roof, fence, the lemon tree in back. Then I thought about the name on the paper. Not a crown, not a shackle, just a responsibility. I thought about the line that runs between a father and a son, sometimes bent by the wind, sometimes bearing a load, sometimes springing back. The only thing that matters is that it doesn't break. Dad, Aaron said, still looking down the street, thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for standing with me, I answered. He laughed, and the laugh cracked a thin shell of quiet. I laughed too. Next morning the sun came up early, and Scottsdale looked newly washed. I woke first, brewed coffee, set out 2 mugs, and opened the porch door to let the breeze in. Aaron shuffled down with sleep still at the corners of his eyes, grinned, and pulled out a chair. We sipped, watched neighbors walk their dogs, listened to the garbage truck. We didn't say Sienna's name or Victor's. We didn't need to. Some names, once emptied of power, sink like stones tossed in a lake. By noon, the coffee had gone cold. I texted a long thank you to my doctor friend, wrote an email to the detective, and sent a shorter note to the clerk at the recorder's office. I hesitated, then crossed the lawn and knocked on the neighbor's door. Rosa opened it, eyes wide, then smiling. I just wanted to bring you this, I said, holding out a small card and a grocery store bouquet. Thank you for speaking up when it mattered. She waved both hands, cheeks flushing. You don't have to. I do, I said. For myself. To remember people still choose the right side. She smiled, hugged the flowers to her chest. I'll put them in the kitchen window, she said. So I'll remember every morning. That afternoon the detective called. Straight to the point. Sienna and Victor were being held while investigators dug into charges of coercion, fraud, and forgery. There may be more, he said, but as for you and your son, you both did the right things. Thank you for coming in early and staying calm. I thanked him, hung up, and stood on the porch watching heat ripple the street until the distance looked like stretched rubber. The near things, the rail, the doormat, the lemon tree, stood sharp. It hit me then. Life doesn't demand we see forever. It asks us to see clearly what's in our hands. And when I thought about this trip, set in motion by a whisper and a memory card, I understood something else. The thing that keeps a home standing isn't the lock or the walls or even the law. It's people who choose to square their shoulders at the right moment. A father, a son, a neighbor. Add a page or two where they belong. That's enough. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. Each of your likes, shares, and subscriptions is a great motivation for me to continue writing the next stories. Thank you for listening, goodbye, and see you again.